This is the Mathematics Education Podcast from mathedpodcast.com. Welcome to the Math Ed Podcast. My name is Sam Otten from the University of Missouri, and with me today is Lyn English, who's a professor in the School of Curriculum at Queensland University of Technology over in Brisbane, Australia. Lyn, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Sam. It's lovely being in your country.
We are going to be talking about Lyn's career in mathematics education. So I want to go back to the beginning. What was it, Lyn, that inspired you, or where was your first entry into the field of mathematics education?
Oh, well, I've always loved mathematics, and I was a teacher of mathematics in the primary school and wrote maths curriculum materials for students who were on distance education out west. And then I wanted to pursue further studies, so I did my master's degree, which had 12 coursework subjects and a big thesis, and Graham Jones, who was at Illinois State University and supervised a number of students, someone on your faculty here, he encouraged me, and I really enjoyed the study. And then I moved on and did my doctorate at the University of Queensland, University of Queensland. Did that part-time while I was still teaching as a university person. And that's, and so my topic area was combinatorial studies of young children, where I looked at children from ages 3 to 4 preschool right up to ages of 8. Did my in-depth study on that,
So was it a hard transition going from teaching to the more academic field, or did it feel like a natural kind of progression?
It was natural because I did, when I went through many decades ago, they didn't, the Bachelor of Education was just introduced. I had a diploma, and so I was studying part-time, but no, I loved the study, and then moving to the Masters and the Doctorate, and no, it wasn't really a hard transition. It was just a bit hard getting study done as well as teaching full-time.
Oh, wow, yeah. So that overlapped there for a while.
Yes.
We find that hard with our students, and we kind of don't allow them to do that. Here we force them to go full-time.
They're lucky to do full-time. Well, that would just be the ideal, to go full-time. That would just be heaven. But, I did mine part-time. And that was in both cognitive psychology and mathematics education. So I was very much interested in, and I still am, but cognitive psychology, cognition was a very strong part of my area, as well as statistics. It's combinatorics, yeah.
Right. What are some of the most potent memories from your doctoral studies experience?
Oh, dear. I suppose frustrations at times with supervision, I suppose, but I won't go into that. I suppose fitting everything in, because I had to do it at night time after I'd finished teaching and that. And we didn't have, we had the computers, and we didn't have some of the facilities we have today. I did go out to schools and videotaping, and I had somebody who helped me with the videotaping, which was good. But apart from that, except when I was close to submitting my thesis, and my supervisor said to me, "I don't know why you've got, I think, chapter 5 in there, Lyn." I said, "Oh, geez, I'm about to." And anyway, I explained to him. He said, "Yeah, well, I just adjusted a few things and he could see it in there." But, that was it. But anyway, I got it in there and it was examined and through,
All right. Into the 1990s, you had a piece that was in the Journal for Research in Mathematics Education, and this has been a very highly cited piece, so I wanted to just get a little bit of your memories of that piece. So this one was about students' formal and informal problem posing.
Yes, I suppose all of this, and my trajectory, I suppose you can use that term, of career, has stemmed from my great belief in what students can do, what children can do, and also I was always interested in problem solving, but creative problem solving, and letting students solve problems that were challenging, that I knew they could solve. They might not exactly solve them the way that we'd expect them to solve, but I was very much into open-ended type of problems, and where we could really let the students be creative and be flexible thinkers, creative thinkers. And I felt at the time, because in the 1990s that I've moved away from the sort of problem posing. I've still done a lot on problem posing even more recently, but the problem posing that I looked at in the 90s was working with, say, your number sentence and so on, because that was very much the flavour at the time. And I used to get a bit frustrated because students were just solving problems in a routine procedural fashion without the opportunity to be more creative and flexible in their thinking. So I wanted to see how they would solve some of these problems when they were in more informal contexts versus formal, traditional way. And from that notion of wanting to see and encourage students to be creative and flexible in their problem solving, that has sort of driven me throughout my whole career. And I've proved time and time again what students can do when you give them problems that enables them to be flexible.
Yeah.
And I think, as I mentioned in my talk today, what I've always been trying to do, and referring to an recent article I read, was that having low entry points, allowing and high ceilings, so that you've got different levels of, I use the term sophistication, in the way in which students can respond. And so with each of the, as I've progressed throughout, I've been looking at problems that do allow for flexibility in thinking, creative problem solving, while at the same time still targeting your disciplinary content.
Right. And I think one of the reasons that Jeremy piece from 1998 is so cited is because you did find rich examples of how creative the students could be if they were given problems in informal settings.
Yes.
Where the formal contexts seem to really limit them. They felt like I have to solve this in a certain kind of prescribed way.
That's right.
And so to see the power of students having that creativity and having that expansive approaches.
That's right, exactly. We increasingly need that, and that's what employers are calling for. You know, they're not necessarily interested in the straight, hardcore mathematics and routine procedures and so on. They want those who can think outside the box and can be flexible problem solvers and look for novel and new ways to solve problems. And often I've found over the years that the students that whom teachers say, look, I don't know whether this particular group of students or student will be able to solve that problem. They're not, they don't achieve terribly highly on the regular maths program. And the teachers are amazed when these students solve the problems that enable them to enter at different levels and solve the problems that are appealing to them. And some of the problems that I looked at deductive reasoning for a number of years, and you ask the students, is this mathematics? Oh, no, it's not mathematics, because it's not the proceduralised problem solving. It's a use of mathematics in a real world context, or that enables them to solve appealing problems.
Yeah, so in one of our courses right here at Mizzou, we've been reading some of the CGI work from Carpenter and colleagues.
Yes.
And it's reminded me of a little bit of your work that you're talking about now, because they also found kindergartners who, if you just give them a problem in a context, they can solve mathematics problems that we would have thought were third grade problems or fourth grade problems.
Yes.
But the kindergartners can do it if you just get out of their way.
That's right, exactly.
And
let them solve them from, absolutely. Yeah. And I've found that time and again.
Yeah. And they can do that until they learn from schooling that they're supposed to do it in a certain way. And now that actually kind of...
Well, that's a worry. I mean, you've got to strike a balance, of course, but we tend to close, we tend to close their minds at times if we don't expose them to problems that challenge their thinking.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you've moved your thinking on a little bit since the 90s. I want you to just say a little bit more about how you differ now from when you look at yourself back in the 90s.
Well, I won another milestone, was meeting Dick Lesh, and many decades ago, and I'm very, very fond of Dick and his wife Jill. And Dick was such a forward-looking thinker. He really is often quoted with his model listing activities, modelling problems, and he got me into it. They were just wonderful problems because of the different relevant context you could take, tying it in with the curriculum. For example, if students are looking at history or social science, in Australia the landing of the first fleet and so on, if they're studying that in their social science or social studies curriculum, we do modelling problems on that. So it means that it's fitting in with their study in other disciplines. They don't see it as an add-on, but they see it as an application of mathematics to solving a real-world problem. So I love the modelling problems of the Dick Lesh, and I still do them. I still create my own today on the form of model listing. Yeah, so that was a real milestone, meeting Dick Lesh, working with him, attending modelling, the ICMA, the International Conference on the Teaching of Modelling and Application, I think it's called. I haven't been there for a while, and that got me into modelling, which is interpreted in a wide range of things. And then I what got me into engineering education, which I see as a link across the STEM disciplines, was that I attended one of the conferences with Dick, and he was started to work with engineering students and bringing in engineering and engineering contexts and concepts into the modelling. Mm-hmm. And I could see how rich that area was, and so I started looking at engineering education, working in with my colleagues at Purdue, and I could see the design processes linked very nicely to your mathematical problem solving in modelling. Then I've just gone into engineering education, but not losing the maths and science, seeing that as linking maths and science education. But yeah, I would say Dick Lesh and his work has been very instrumental in my direction.
And it still has students working on problems with low floors and high ceilings,
Absolutely,
and they still have a chance to be creative about how we're going to model and being critical about how we're going to refine
That's right.
models.
And the important thing is the critical analysis and justifying and explaining how you got your models. And there'll be different levels of sophistication in the models. But this, as I mentioned today, this sharing, which is one of Dick Lesh's task constructions, shareability and reusability, is that your models, you can share it with others. They can use it, they can critique it, they can highlight aspects that you might not have thought about. So you can run with those ideas and refine your model. A shareability of your model is being able to apply it to related situations and modifying it if necessary. And also students remember what they've learnt and what they've achieved because they associate with the context. So they remember, oh yes, we looked at making licorice, or we looked at the Commonwealth Games, and we found that Australia did better than whatever. And so it's the context makes them recall the mathematics and the model that they developed. And I do see learning. I see a lot of the transfer of learning from one activity to another. Even in the engineering, like in third year, I had some classes of going across a 3-year longitudinal study. And when they were in 6th grade, I heard the students saying, oh, you remember in our very first year how we did that about the planes or whatever, and we looked at the planes. I think I can apply some of those ideas to this. It might be an earthquake, exploring earthquakes. So that was interesting. They were referring back to what they learnt in the first year of the program and applying in the third year.
Yeah, that's exciting to see.
It was really good to see, yes. And so I taught them something and they learned something, yeah. So it was good, yeah.
I'm speaking with Lyn English from Queensland University of Technology. She's a fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia. And we're going to speak more about your work on STEM education. But before that, I want to ask you about something where a lot of people might know you, which is from the journal Mathematical Thinking and Learning.
Yes.
You were the founding editor of that journal, still the editor. Were you the editor all the way along from founding to now?
Yes. Okay. And I sort of worried about that a bit, but then a few years ago I asked colleagues and associate editors, and they said, no, keep doing it.
We've got a system that works?
Yes, well, I hope so. I've got. I started the journal really with Lawrence Earlbaum, Lawrence Earlbaum Associates. He was wonderful. They got a lot of reviews for it, and so I'm going back to 1997 where there weren't the number of journals there are today. And Laurie Earlbaum, LEA, were wonderful to work with. And then when he retired, Taylor and Francis Rutledge took it over, and they've been wonderful. I work with a superb editorial editor there at Taylor and Francis, and I submit my regular every 4 issues per year and submit it on time. But they're excellent as well. So I think having a supportive publishing company, a wonderful editorial assistant with me in Brisbane, makes things flow well. Yeah.
Well, on behalf of the field, I thank you for your service on that journal. It's great. I mean, it's one of the top journals in our field.
Oh, well, it's lovely to hear.
I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite part of editing a journal, and what's your least favorite part?
I think learning myself what's happening around the world, increasing my own knowledge. That's a big plus. Having the satisfaction of seeing, of working. What I try and do is work with, revising papers and helping people where I can. Sometimes if a paper needs some work and I feel it could do with a bit of work before I send to reviews to increase their chances of getting good reviews, I'll provide them with some feedback, and generally the authors are happy to do that. And even, and I hate rejecting papers. I just hate it because I know how much, with my own journal writing, I know how much it it takes, how much thought and time it takes to produce a paper.
Right.
And so I say to that I do appreciate it, but I hope the feedback is helpful.
Yeah.
And it's very rewarding to me when I have authors come back to me, and often it'll be who are just starting out, and they thank me and they said that feedback, I've learned a lot from that feedback that was really helpful, and even several revisions through to the publication stage, that's rewarding for me. Yeah.
So you mentioned when the journal started, there were fewer journals in our field.
A lot fewer,
now there
yes.
are more. Where do you see mathematical thinking and learning fitting amongst all the other journals that are here now?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question. I suppose we're competing. We don't have a strict word limit, and I think that is a plus. Because I know that most of the journals do have a word limit, and I can understand why, because you've got, for example, I've limited to 88 printed pages per issue or so much per year. And also I do point out to some authors that, look, your paper is overly long, readers are not going to want to plough through that length, so I think you could cut back a bit here or there. It's very hard, I know, just from a journal editor, writing articles myself. So I think that, but also we do try and, although we accept a range of articles, we do try and focus on the mathematical thinking and the learning side, the learning aspect, whether it's from a teacher perspective or a student perspective. I also try to, like with some special issues, I've got one on planning, I try to keep abreast of some topical issues that I might be able to do special issues on. But I suppose it's probably comparable to, well, as far as the style of articles it receives is comparable to Jeremy and to ESM. It's different to ZDM because it has like specialised issues.
And ZDM has a character count, like 60,000 characters, I think. So they get very precise in what you're allowed
that's
to.
That's right, and what you're allowed to.
I think I submitted one there and I was maybe a few hundred characters over, and I thought we had already cut it down so much, but they said, no, 60,000 characters, please.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I hate about journals, and I don't think I'm alone, is the editorial manager systems. Every journal has a different one, and I'm sort of used to mine now. I've got to be. I've been using it for many, many years. But even sometimes I'll make a mistake. But I know submitting my own articles to various different journals, and you have your journal, the editors, it'll take you a good hour to upload a paper and all the figures and everything, and they're all different. And I can understand those who have difficulty in uploading a paper, and I say, no, I have the same problems myself. So, but that's nothing to do with that. It's the publishers that have the yes. But yes, I don't know whether I've really answered your question, Sam, but I say it complements the other journals. We try and maintain a high standard of work. We're pretty thorough with the editing and that. Yeah, I'm saying the other journals aren't thorough. They're all very, thorough. But
and I think having the thinking and learning, it doesn't exclude a lot, but if you try to keep the focus on students' mathematical thinking and learning, even if it's from a teacher's perspective, I mean, it definitely distinguishes it from like the Journal of Mathematics Teacher Education, for example.
Oh, yeah, no, it's totally different to that.
So there is a little bit of complementary.
Yes, different to that. And it's different in many ways to the new Springer Journal of STEM Education. I think it's called the International Journal. I published a couple in there. They're very rigorous too. It's an online journal with Springer, but that cuts right across the... I have had, for example, Engineering Education. Julie Gainsford has done some lovely article, one or two articles, but it's really just the mathematics in contrast to some others, like Natalie Sinclair's very good journal article, a journal on digital technologies and mathematics in with Springer and Open. We combine technology and mathematics, but it's primarily mathematics thinking and learning. Yeah.
Sure. So going back to the work that you're doing on STEM education, so you've had a few grants in the past where you looked at STEM issues in primary grades, and that's leading to a current grant that you have also around STEM. But let me first go to those ones that you did in the past years. What was the driving motivation for you to get into STEM issues and for focusing on earlier grades rather than maybe like, university STEM or high school STEM?
Well, I felt that it's not much good starting in the secondary grades when so much of the foundational work occurs in the primary grades. For example, in statistics, in modelling with statistics, it's no use students going into the secondary school and learning all the formal statistics from procedural point of view if they haven't had a foundational understanding in the primary grades. For example, posing and refining questions is very difficult, and it's very important, not just in some of the data modelling with data, but in even just if you're doing a dissertation. You've got to, if you're doing a paper, you've got to have our students are learning. I like them to pose questions, which comes back to my problem posing questions, looking at, do they need refinement? Are your questions clear? Will you be able to gather the data that's going to address your research question? Okay, when you do, what data are you going to collect? To what, how are you going to use that data? What are you going to do with it? And there's a range of things that they can do in analysing it, like prioritising, weighting some data, whatever, and representing the data in a range of ways that they would like. And being able to not just go through mechanical steps, but at each step of looking at the question, looking at the data that's needed, perhaps going back, refining the question, then coming up with a model or some product or representation that you think answers your question. You say, no, I don't really think this data, I've got to either gather some more data or reanalyse or look back at my question. And when you present your product, however you represent it, whether it's in a table, whether it's in different representations, you come to a conclusion and you realise that you draw a conclusion and you can draw inferences, like make some predictions, look at the variation and look at the certainty. Can we draw that conclusion with certainty? Not really. There's a certain amount, and the students, we want the students to appreciate, just because they get an answer or a product or whatever, they can't say with 100% confidence level that this is the solution. And the students are appreciating that. And I found over the 3 years in the previous project, the students have come to know how to look at models and data critically. So they will say, how do you know that? Why do you think that is more important? Can you really draw that conclusion because you only had a limited amount of data? We don't know what's happened in other time periods or whatever. So helping students become critical consumers and producers of data, being able to analyse is particularly important. And they need a lot of experience in that.
Yeah. It makes me think of, too, that helping a student to understand this is definitely the right prediction to make, but that doesn't mean that the prediction is definitely going to come true.
That's right, exactly.
Even if you have a well-justified prediction based on data and interpretations and things, you still might have to say, but there's still a fairly good chance that it might not happen.
That's right. And, even year 2, like 7-year-olds, can look at data they've been working on and they can make some predictions based on the trends that they see in the data. And that's for 6-7-year-olds can do that, and it's quite amazing. But you get them young, you expose them to meaningful hands-on activities dealing with data, they can proceed. But
so it sounds like one of the things that you have found through your work, which I think is very important, is just the capabilities of the children.
Absolutely.
That they can do this. Are there some other main findings that you feel like have come out of those past projects that you've already completed about STEM education?
That an awful lot more work is needed. For example, we talk about the STEM and STEM acronym, and it's been the flavour for a few years now, and increasingly so, like in Australia and obviously in the US as well. But we still don't know what STEM, we refer to STEM, I say, is often referred to as just STEM is science. And it's not. It depends on how you interpret STEM, but I don't like, I get concerned that maths can be left, even though they say, yes, maths is important, science is important, but then when they talk about STEM, they just say science. Okay, science could, we can say science does encompass mathematics, but mathematics is a discipline in its own right, and it needs recognition, and particularly in your integrative or interdisciplinary projects, it's very important. And engineering gets left out. Engineering education is particularly important, but they don't want to know about it. And the E, as I said in my talk today, the E just seems to be there to keep the acronym nice. And technology, well, that's gaining increased attention, but I think we need to give equitable attention to the respective disciplines. And with the current focus and debate, I suppose, on integrative approaches, interdisciplinary approaches, we need to keep the respective disciplines in mind and not just let one overtake another.
Yeah, I think in my experience or in observation, a lot of times science is the driving force.
Yes.
And then you can see the technology there, and you can maybe see some connections to engineering and mathematics, but it still seemed clearly that science was the one driving. It's in the driver's seat.
That's right, yes. And because everybody, like our government will talk about, the importance of science, and we have a STEM innovation in science and innovation agenda. I just feel that we need to not just equate STEM with science.
Mm-hmm. So you have a current project now that's been funded in Australia, and it's about the modeling that you talked about before, and having primary grade students modeling. So what are the overall goals of that project, and let us know where you are kind of in that project.
Well, we're only sort of into our third or fourth activity. We want to continue from, this is a new lot of students, but it's a 4-year going from year 3 through to year 6. We want them to be exposed to statistical investigations, but bringing in the other aspects of engineering, aspects of technology, some science and mathematics as well. What we've looked at so far, we're finding the students, after the first year, they are competent at doing representations. They can see trends, they can see variation. Variation underlies statistics. They can see variation. For example, one activity we did early last year was we looked at manufacturing licorice, and we looked at what goes in, the quality control, the engineering aspects of manufacturing licorice, and then we wanted them to they then brought in as our statistics. They made licorice, they had a number of constraints, by hand, and did some measuring and so on, recording of the data. And then we had those extruders or whatever, the little Play-Doh things, and they made the licorice with these extruders, which were more succinct and more accurate. And they recorded the data and so on, and they had to compare the data, look at the variation in the handmade versus the variation in the manufactured ones, and they represented that, and they looked in however they wanted. They could see the greater variation in the handmade ones to the manufactured ones, and that led us back to also thinking about, in manufacturing, how consistent, how little is there still variation in manufactured products, and we discussed that, and we looked at, there is some, but and then we were discussing about if you had the choice of, would you rather the manufactured goods or the handmade goods? And we were looking at it. It was ideal because the next day, or the following week, was the school fete or their school fair, and they were looking at homemade things. And some students, and we were hoping, some students did say yes. Well, you have more uniformity. You don't have as much variation with the manufactured ones. But then some students said, I'd far rather manufactured ones because you don't know how dirty people's hands might be if they make them, by hand, and with the germs and so on. And so they were more concerned about the, cleanliness and so on. But a lot of them, they appreciated, and they could see why the manufactured products were important, and we looked at quality control and so on. So that was bringing in just informal engineering, the statistics, variation, representations, and also some of the technology as well.
Right. So those students, then, the project is going to be with them?
For 4 years, same students. And we've got them this year. And the teacher was wonderful. It was only probably a small class we worked at, and we've got students in Tasmania, which is the island at the bottom of Australia, and they're doing a number of classes. We're seeing already, in the improvement in the grade 3 teacher said, I can't believe what these students have come up with. And it did a probability activity as well, but they were just really amazed. And then we moved into the second year, and once again they're doing really well. We've been focusing a fair bit on posing and refining questions and looking at the data you're going to collect to answer, and that's really difficult, as I said before, and that's very important.
And who's teaching? Is this the project in partnership with teachers?
Yes, the teachers. We work in with the teachers. We develop quite detailed teaching notes, so we provide background information for the teachers. We have some videos, and then we have a student booklet so they can record all their representations and their responses, because we use that as part of our data as well, as well as we record their group discussions. But the teacher implements it. We are always in the classroom when the kids are working, and to observe them. So it's a teacher, and the most important, well, very important thing is to fit in with their curriculum, because we don't want to see these activities being add on.
Right.
So we look at what topic areas they're covering in maths, science, technology, and of course the engineering is part of our design and technology curriculum.
Okay. Yeah, I imagine that's important. And the last thing I want to ask you about that is the outcomes. So one big thing in the United States is if we were doing an initiative to try to increase the modeling and the problem posing and, that kind of thinking processes. In the United States, a lot of the pressure would be that those need to show up on the formalized state tests.
Yep.
But I'm wondering, in your case, are you looking at outcomes over these 4 years for the students, kind of formalized, standardized test score outcomes, or are you looking at other types of outcomes like their own problem solving or their problem posing?
Probably, well, more the latter part. We do, surprisingly, not that you can claim causation, but the classes that we've worked at over the several years, the schools, we have a national testing program, 3, 5 and 7 and 9. The students, their scores have really improved. We can't say that we're responsible for that, but it's interesting at the schools how their scores have improved. We do, because the assessment is important, we'll do an assessment at the end or before and the end, and the teachers, or we'll develop a special assessment which the teachers will use in their formal reporting as well. So we don't rely on, we're not interested in how students go in formal national assessments, because they miss out on a lot, because sometimes a child can do not terribly well on that, but excel on some of our activities. But we try and build in the assessment so the teacher can use that to report on that and what the students have achieved. And a few of the teachers have showed us the tools they use, so we try and fit in with those as well. Yeah.
And anything about the affective side, like about their attitudes towards STEM or how they see science and math?
Yes, in the previous program on engineering education, we did explore the students' conceptions of engineering and STEM and so on, and look at them after, and there was certainly improvement. They knew what they loved, their engineering activities, and they knew what they involved. But certainly you can just see by the students, like for example, when we finished one project middle of last year, and the students said, "No more engineering, no more," and I said, and because it all depends on funding, of course, and they said, "No more," and the teachers are reusing the programs, so they've been using all of our programs, which is great. So it means that it's not just a one-off thing. They're because they can see what the students can achieve on it. But
right, so the teachers of their own volition are continuing it with the next.
Yes, which is good, because we can't make them, of course, but they can see the value of it. Like the teacher last year with the got a couple of class now. We did the licorice. She borrowed the equipment and that because she was doing it again with her class this year. She was really pleased with what the kids have done. So that's very rewarding for us.
My guest is Lyn English, who is a Career Research Medal awardee from the Mathematics Education Research Group of Australasia. And I just have one more question for you, Lyn. It's just a kind of fun question that I ask all of my guests. So we've been talking about your career in math education, but I wonder what you might imagine yourself doing if you weren't in mathematics education.
Well, I always wanted to be an architect or an engineer, but in my days, given my age, the architecture, you had to be pretty good at drawing and that, and I wasn't very good at art, so they gave that. But I always wanted to be an architect, and I would have loved to have been an engineer as well. But in those days, women just you weren't encouraged to go into engineering. But architecture or engineering, yes.
Yeah, so there's some famous architecture in Australia, actually.
Yeah.
There's a particular one I have in mind that probably is in a lot of photographs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so
thank you so much for taking the time during your visit here to sit down with us and speak to us about your career.
My pleasure, Sam. Thank you very much. And certainly I've been enjoying my time in the US. Everybody's been so friendly and so welcoming, and I'm learning a lot as well. So my pleasure to give you the time.